This is the Bottom Shot Podcast.
Pulvereri is up high. They come out of turn number 4. Stutter between the turns. The fans come to their feet.
It is Ted Christopher still in command. Keith Rocco right there on his back bumper.
Bringing Stafford Motor Speedway's past and present together.
They are side by side running for the finish line. It's a photo finish.
Deep into turn number 3. He goes in deeper than most. Christopher is in trouble. It is Keith Rocco to slingshot to the bottom, and he'll take down the win.
A Stafford Motor Speedway production where we will hear from the personalities from the past and present that found success on the legendary half-mile oval.
The scoreboard shows goose eggs as they wait. It's Pulvereri. He wins it by inches over Richie Evans in the Spring Sizzler.
Unbelievable chain of events.
Now, here are your hosts, Paula Root and Kyle Rickey.
Joined now here on the Bottom Shot Podcast by somebody very familiar to the Stafford Motor Speedway for, what were we just talking, 47 years, at least 47 years, as the voice.
It's actually more than that, but we're going to keep it at 47 because it really makes me feel old just to think about it, to be honest with you.
Ben Dodge joins us here on the show. And Ben, first off, welcome to the Bottom Shot Podcast.
I've heard so much. I've watched it, and this is all good. You know, you guys are really becoming the pioneers in what you do. And it's so interesting because over the years, I had the opportunity to do a lot of things. I did my own television show on Nesson with Tim DeRoyne, and we did 367 episodes. And they centered around Stafford, Thompson, Riverside, those race facilities. And, what we were doing then, we were considered the outlaws. We were considered the bad guys. I remember getting called into Jim Hunter, who was a big shot at NASCAR's office, and he said, you only say positive, good things about, NASCAR facilities. And I said, I can't do my job if I do that. And he said, well, you won't have a job if you do that. So he kind of put the mark on the floor and said, there's the line. If you want to cross it, go ahead. And, of course, as you guys know, I had to cross the line. So, it was interesting. And basically, this is the same thing. You're reaching individuals and people that don't normally have the opportunity in the off season to reach out and see the backstage stories. Everybody knows what happens on race day. Mm-hmm. Everybody knows what happens in the racetrack, but nobody knows the personalities. And I think that best showed with the Todd Owen story. Todd Owen, the real Todd Owen, right. the kid that I knew that took in my office and scolded him and still scolds him today, by the way.
He brought that up a couple of times.
He did. I've literally scarred him for life. He has to shave, he has to do this, he has to do that, right, and so forth with it. But that's the real guy you saw there. Yeah. Nobody knows that. He's a hard-working, honest guy and so forth with it. The Christopher family, everybody knows the race side, but the back scene side, well, that's a whole different ballgame. It really honestly is.
So let's get down to the bare bones of Ben Dodge, though. How did you've been involved in the sport for your entire life.
Yep.
How did it begin as a kid? Like, how did it start?
Here's how it actually began. My father was a truck driver, and we were a really poor family. And I say this very, very honestly, and most people today think they know the Ben Dodge, and they don't get it. We were what was referred to by today's standards as trailer trash. We lived in a trailer park. My neighbors growing up were gypsies. They were, and I can say this, they were prostitutes, they were alcoholics, they were all of those things. But you got to understand, guys, what an education I got being around those as a little kid. So, I mean, it's not a bad thing. It was a good thing. But in order for my family to succeed and survive, my dad loved racing, and he was an amazing mechanic. He went to school to become a mechanic, even though he was a truck driver. And so he literally decided that this was a great way, if he could race, to make grocery money. So in those days, it was $30 or something, but that was a huge amount of money. Right. So we used to come to the racetrack. My father towed to the 54 Chevy convertible with a Continental kit because my father was a mechanic, and it had no reverse. And he flat towed the race car. Now, people don't understand what flat towed means. It was just a bumper hitch. Mm. And he bought the bumper hitch off Western Auto for $6, and you clipped it on the back of your bumper and towed your car. And we went all over the place. We would run Friday nights on dirt here, And then we would go to Plainville on asphalt with the same car, no trailer, no fancy stuff. Right, I was a little kid. I'd sleep in the back where the convertible top goes down. My mother was with him. Women weren't allowed in the pit area. So what happened here is this facility was a dirt facility, and it was the old horse track, and it had the motorcycle track in the middle of it. And the gentleman that ran it and owned it was Clarence Benton. His house and property still down the street from here at Stafford. And he was in the trucking business. So it was a natural tie-in. My dad drove truck. He was in the trucking business. So they hit it off and they became real good friends. So as we were poor people, we'd come to the racetrack so my dad could race. My dad was the most popular driver here in the 60s. And the famed announcer then was a guy by the name of Jim Powers.
Yep.
And Jim Powers would refer to, the race program. His favorite slogan was, "Nothing ever happens at Stafford." And then he would talk about my dad who started on the pole and ended up dead last and all that and so forth. Well, I didn't have enough money to get in. My mother wasn't allowed in the pit area. She didn't have enough money, so we would watch from the backstretch. Now, the pits here at Stafford was on the backstretch, and there's a little metal booth when you come into the back of this property. That was the total only pit entrance there was to buy a ticket, right? And everybody parked over there, and so forth with it. So you were like in your own world. It was a different world to be on this side. And on this side of the racetrack, there was a covered grandstand at first, and that disappeared, and burnt and so forth with it. So I would be over there, and I was a little kid. I was 7 years old, 8 years old. And this Clarence Benton guy, who was a huge man who wore a felt hat, and he was a prominent guy in Stafford. And, we all know the story of Stafford, even today. There are certain families that control Stafford as a town, a community. It happens in every town. Yep. It's great. It is. They care about their community. They built it, and Clarence Benton was part of that original group, right? So he was he would come over and he would talk to my mom, and he would talk to me as a little kid. And one day he said, "How come you don't get to go to the other side of the grandstand?" And I kind of looked down at my shoes and, with tears in my eyes, and I said, "We can't afford that." And he said, "Well, you're going to afford it." So my first job at Stafford, he took me to the other side, which was this side, actually in front of this exact building we're sitting in. And he turned around and he said, "You're going to make popcorn." So I made popcorn. So then he let me watch the races. Then the next step of all of that is he allowed me when I was done, because he used to hear me and I would repeat what the announcer said. I would literally, as a kid, say everything the announcer said. So he said, "Go upstairs, sit on the steps, and listen to that guy. I know you want to do it." So I'd sit on the steps of the old announcer's tower, and I'd repeat everything that the announcer said, right? So that's how it really all began. And that was like, believe it or not, that was like 1960.
I have 1,000 questions already.
Yeah.
First of all, what was it like with the old pits in the back? I can't even really picture that. The pits are in the back. I've seen the pictures. We've all kind of we've all heard the stories. But what was it like to have that totally separated from the main grandstand area here so there was never any interaction?
No, never any interaction at all whatsoever. And you got to remember, in those days there was no big haulers, there was no big transporters, there was none of that stuff that we see today. So they were really isolated over there. And the only time that you saw them, which was kind of cool if you think about it, it was like a magic trick.
They were behind the curtain.
They're behind the curtain. And all of a sudden, wow, there they are, Paul. Here they come, and so forth. The other crazy thing about Stafford when it was dirt, and, the old families in town, like the Furnace brothers, would remember this. They had an old record. It was so awesome. And then, and so on. But in the bottom of turns 1 and 2 was a pond, which was a huge pond.
Really?
Okay? And
in the infield.
In the infield, okay? And you could literally go off that racetrack and end up in that pond.
Wow.
And many cars did. And when you went into that pond, it was really bigger than a pond. Just the roof of these old coupes, and these cars were high.
Yeah.
They weren't low.
It was pretty deep.
It was pretty deep. And so that was all part of it. There were 2 gates on and off the racetrack. You came onto the racetrack, almost the exact location you come onto it now. But you went off the racetrack just coming off turn number 2. There was a gate there.
Yeah, I think I've seen pictures
of
that.
And you went, you went through there and so forth with it. So it was really, pretty unique and pretty cool.
Wow.
And this side over here was not where our pit area is today and where our concessions are and all of that stuff. It didn't go that far down. The grandstand was there, but you couldn't go behind the grandstand.
Yeah.
You went in front of the grandstand.
Because they were the smaller ones, too.
Yes.
Yeah. So it was the same bleachers that are now the ones closer to turn 4 now.
Exactly.
Those are actually the same ones.
Exactly.
But those were all the way down.
They were all the way.
Did it even go down to as far
not
as
that
they
far.
do now?
No, not that far. And so forth with it. So that was unique. There was one main concession stand. It would be like where the old gate was to go into the pit area, the walkthrough gate that we don't use this year. We use the new wider gate. There was one concession stand right there. Turk was the concessionaire. And my second job at this speedway on Friday nights was, in the old days, the Catholic religion said you could not eat meat on Friday. Remember, that is a sin, okay? So Turk came up with this brilliant idea that he was going to make tuna rolls, right, and sell them on Friday, okay? So my second job was I was the official tuna roll maker in advance for Friday. And I remember as plain as day, I would get yelled at because I was only supposed to put 3 olives on the tuna roll, and I would put 4 olives on them. And I would get my butt chewed out like you would not believe. What are you doing? You know how much money that costs? And everything else. And so it was really cool. It was really, a whole different time and a different era, and so forth. The other interesting thing for me is I literally, and I think there are probably a lot of people like this, but for me, I lived through an era of time at this facility. I always called it home base, even though I went other places and I had tremendous success at other places. I always came back to Stafford. I always wanted to be a part of Stafford. And the Arute family always accepted me. We had fights like you wouldn't believe. Paul, me and your grandfather, you would not believe.
The Arutes are stubborn. I think that's come up a few times on this
podcast. Boy, we had fights you would not believe. And we'll get into that in a few minutes, and so forth with it. But I saw all these things happen. And when they changed it to asphalt, right, I had the opportunity to see something amazing that maybe 5 people witnessed. Mel Barlow purchases the facility from Clarence Benton. He is a big midget guy, and he is going to build the Super Speedway of the North, which in all actuality is the Super Speedway of the North, right? Based on the era that it was built, based on the time period, it really honestly is. So he comes here, and he's a car guy. He owns a car lot in Rockville, Connecticut, next to me where I live, so I've known him since a kid. His wife was a brilliant woman. She was an author and a writer, totally brilliant. She was the business person. And you got to witness this. Mel Barlow was this great little guy, but he had the Coke bottle glasses, the whole routine, and he turned around on this given day. I come out to see what Stafford has become, and they're working on it, and the they're putting the posts up, and they're doing all of the planning and the designing of it and everything else, right? And I watch Mel Barlow walk over and move the stakes. He just moved them. Turn 1 and 2, he moved them a different spot. Turn 3 and 4, he moved them out this way, and so forth with it. And he came back, and I said, I'm a kid now. I'm not young kid. And I said to him, why did you do that? And his exact words were, I'm going to create a facility that no 2 turns are the same.
Wow. There you go.
Odds on his truth, okay?
I mean, I've heard the tale.
It's
come up a couple of times in this show.
It really, really came up. The wildest part was, that wasn't the best part. The wildest part was probably on opening. First, I got to get to opening night because opening night was cool. On opening night, they literally, no race facility ever had what we call, anchor mesh fence. That's the little diamond in the fences, right? And nobody ever had that, right? Because every facility was old and worn out and showing its wares and everything else. They put this up. They put the grandstand that now exists here that you stepped up on. Nobody ever seen anything like that. These were all first of their time period. Well, opening night, when they turned on the lights, the fence, which was galvanized, reflected and you could not see the cars on the racetrack.
Jeez.
You absolutely could not see the cars. It was the most insane thing. You could hear them, but the reflection was not there. The following week, they painted the entire fence flat black, right, and everything came back to normal, and so forth with it. But what a tremendous opening night. I mean, your grandfather's race cars, the Garuti and Arut cars, were here. Those things were state of the art. They were amazing. No two cars were the same. I mean, Eddie Flemke was here. This was a little guy that looked more like a horse jockey than a race car driver. Gene Burgeon, who was an outstanding football player, big, rugged, tough guy, would get out of his car and do cartwheels, and stuff like that. Those guys all had personalities. Then you had Ernie Gahan, and you had, all the
Bugman.
Oh yeah, and these people were very, very unique, in what they did, and it was something really special. It was a whole different time, a whole different era.
Before we get too far down the pike, the night Clarence brought you out to the front of this building.
Yes.
Before that, was there any interest in driving or being a mechanic? What were your interests?
Wait a minute.
Granted, you were fairly young still.
No, I did drive. Okay, you got to look into the stats here at Stafford. And I got to tell you what I did when I drove. I built my own race car. What happened is we had a division here at Stafford. And matter of fact, it's probably on one of the drawings on one of the walls in here. But we had a division called the All-American Sportsman Division. They were 6-cylinder cars. And I wanted to race. So my dad said to me, and my dad at this particular point had built one of these cars. And he actually bought a car from a gentleman by the name of Bob Ledoux. It was a 39 car. That's how that number originated for our family as one of the numbers. And he bought that car, and he put Tommy Sylvester in the car. Tommy Sylvester and myself, we were young guys. We were, in the beginning, arch rivals. Okay, we're typical young guys.
Really?
My father's paying more attention to your race car. He doesn't help me. Typical kids. We were just kids. We later became very close personal friends and so forth with it. So I built my own race car and I decided to race. Well, by this particular point, Tommy Sylvester had his own family race car, and a gentleman by the name of Frank Wamsley took over my father's car and drove. So on this given night, right, it was like I had raced maybe 4 or 5 races. And, I'm out there and I'm leading the show. How in the hell is this going to happen? Okay, I'm leading the show. Look at me, right? And I'm sitting there and I'm just giving it my all, okay? Then all of a sudden to the outside of me, zoom, here comes Frank Wamsley in the 39 car. My car's the 36 car. He flies by me like I'm standing still. So what would you do? Paul, you raced. I'm not going to let him get away with that, right? I started going and getting hooked up with him. The problem was I was about as experienced as nothing, okay? So guess what? My father's car is leading. I'm in second, okay? My car was leading. I take out my father's car, and I take out me like you never seen anybody take it out before. There was nothing left of those cars, right? And on that given day, Kyle Rickey, I said, I'd be better at talking about this than actually doing this.
Who knew?
Okay?
It all started on the racetrack.
Exactly. And then the other great story that I have to tell with this is over the years I've had a lot of different drivers and that drove for me. And I've been blessed, and I was financially successful at the businesses and things that I did over the years and so forth with it. I had some testing that we did here at Stafford, and Stan Greger drove for me. He actually won here at Stafford, one of the holiday shows. And he drove for me, and Stan Greger was a great guy. But the problem was that Stan Greger didn't really understand the mechanics of the car. So his best friend was Reggie Ruggiero. So whatever Reggie said, he was like a Paul Parrot. Well, you got to do this much stagger, you got to do that, you got to do da-da-da-da-da. So we rent the racetrack because Stan's not going good, and he's out there and he's running and so forth with it. And we're looking at the stopwatch, and he comes in and he goes, well, what do you think of that? And I said, and I quote, right, and I'll clean it up just a tiny bit. I said, any a-hole can go fast on a racetrack all by themselves. And he said, well, if you think it's so easy, then you do it. Ooh, that was a big mistake, right? So I go out, and
you actually got in?
I got in. I go out. The adrenaline, my temper, everything is up. My face is as red can be. Guess what? I go faster than Stan Greger. Okay? Come in off the racetrack, and we never, ever heard any more about that ever again. He never complained. He never said anything or any of the above. So, that was the last time that I drove. It really honestly was.
So when was the first time you began announcing? Like, what was the first time on the mic at any track?
Okay, first I went to, there was a volunteer program that was going on, and the Little T was brand new. Okay. Brand spanking new. It hadn't even had its first race yet. And there was a program, and Bill Slater said to me, called me up, and he said, because he was a dear friend of my whole family, he said, hey, Ben, why don't you come over and why don't you help out the kids? So I go, well, I guess so. I could do that. So I go over and I announce there. Bill Slater brings this gentleman over in a golf cart, and a three-wheel golf cart, by the way. That's how old this story is, right? Brings this gentleman over. I don't know who the heck he is, right? And so forth with it. And I notice they're listening to what I have to say and everything else, and so forth with it. So after the thing is over, Bill says to me, you know who that man was? I said, I have no idea. He says, well, that guy was Don Honig. And he says he's interested in allowing you to announce at the big track. I actually said these exact words, right? I'd love to do that, but I really would like to announce at Stafford, okay? Well, in those days, Paul, you think today we have a lot of fun and controversy and excitement, and it's all part of our business. In those days, there was a rivalry between Thompson and Stafford, okay? And Uncle Jackie, he was right in the thick of things.
No, he always is.
He was so awesome, right, and so forth. And he was my buddy, in those days, because we were both young, and he was my pal. And we hung around, and one minute we hated each other, next minute we were friends. So I tell Jackie about this story, and Jackie goes, no friggin' way. You're going to come and announce at Stafford, right? So 1974 opening day, I come and announce at Stafford for the very first time. And so forth with it. And I really, the blessing for me, guys, is, for one thing, it's amazing in this business, and you both know this, and Kyle, you know it because you're one of the best at what you do. The most amazing thing for me is the amount of people that I got to work with while I have been here in the broadcast business. It's amazing. I mean, it's amazing. And I got to say this, and it's really important to me because it's part of my personal life story, guys. Okay, I had opportunities. I could have went, Ken Squire called me, I could have went to CBS in the old days, I could have went to MRN, the original founding fathers asked me. I had tremendous opportunities. I could have been a Mike Joy type individual, who I regard in the highest, right? But I chose not to. And the reason I chose not to is I had a very small family, and I took care of my family, and I stayed back here. And I liked and loved the people back here in the grassroots. So that was really the true extent of it, And once I got my foot in the door, as the old saying goes, then I was kind of here to stay, I mean, there were times when Jack Sr. said, I'm firing you. You're all done. And then he would call me in the middle of the week and laugh at it. And he said, I was only kidding. And I was like, no, he wasn't. I saw your face. You were not kidding, and so forth.
So my first night on the mic here, you mentioned all the different names that have come through this facility. Mid-90s probably. First night on the mic, you, Mike Joy, Jack Caruso was a sizzler because Mike kind of came around for the
I remember
Sizzlers.
the night.
Mike Massaro was here.
Yes.
And me, I think on pit road. I'm like, oh, my God, it's all these national voices.
That's legit.
The voice of Stafford and little intern Kyle on pit road.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget that night.
Now, wait a minute. Now, and let's go back to that night for a second.
Yeah.
Did I try to make you feel comfortable, though, as you were the new guy?
You did.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that was my job.
Did Jackie scare you?
Yes, he did.
Yes,
absolutely.
He did.
Scared everybody, I think.
He did.
And he'll admit that.
Yeah, and the funniest part is like Mike Joy is the opposite of what you think. You'd think Mike Joy would be the guy that would be barking out. No, he's just as mellow as they come.
But at one point, he was that guy.
Yes, he was.
Listened to the old MRN tapes from here when they did the Sizzler.
Oh, yeah. And the other part, too, is during the course of the years here while I was here, different people came through the door and they left. Jackie Arute, even though he has the Arute name and everything else, his credentials in the broadcast business are literally amazing. Mm-hmm. They really, honestly are
crazy.
And he has a distinctive flair and style like nobody else. Ken Squire has his own unique style. Mike Joy has his own, but Jackie is right up there. He has a brilliant mind. Really does. I am going to hate myself so bad for saying these things.
I don't know if he knows how to actually listen to a podcast. So we'll see. We'll see if he gets back to me.
I told you we were a lot alike. But so as they would go to the next step, and Kyle, you know this. Literally, Jackie was the first guy to go.
Yep.
Okay, he went to MRN. He went to all these places, and he went to the upper level.
Find MRN.
Yeah, he's the guy. Okay, and it's so long ago, everybody kind of forgot about that. So every time somebody would leave, I would get the old Dutch uncle talk. They would say, "Come on, Ben, you got to step up a little bit." Because if I don't make it at the next step, I'll be back here with you, okay? So you don't want that to happen now, do you, Ben? And I'd say, oh, no, you go. You're fine, right? And so forth with it. And the same thing with Mike Joy. Mike Joy, literally, I think that was wife number one, because they both have a lot of wives. They really do.
That's one thing we didn't talk about, Jackie. I could have got a
beautiful
good on
wife.
that one.
Beautiful wives, young, beautiful wives. I'm so proud of them. I really mean that. Okay, so then Mike Joy, he married a beautiful girl from Ellington, and he had his own production company. It was called Turn 4 Productions. And I love that name. That's how I started Start Finish Productions. I was like, I got to have a better name than his. I don't think it was a better name, but it was cool to do, right? And so forth with it. But the deal was when Mike went down not only as a broadcaster, but the corporate side. He was a big wheel with Pontiac. He was a big wheel with all the major players, right? And so forth with it. So the same deal. Mike Joy says to me, listen, Ben, I'm going, with that great voice. Listen, Ben, I'm going. And, but I remember if I have to come back, you've got to step aside. And you got to remember, Mike Joy was the PR guy, the announcer, and the main man here, right? So, that was the deal. So all these people would step forward and they would go on. Another guy that was here that nobody really remembers this is the PRN guy.
Mark Garrow?
Mark Garrow.
Was it Mark Garrow? Yeah, it was.
Yeah, Mark Garrow. And he was here, and he came for a short time. Everybody used this as a stepping stone. So if, Paul, in the future, get a few bucks from these new announcers as a seed to start, and then let them work through the system is what will happen if your father hears that. He's going to say, oh, Ben came up with a good idea there.
So the first night, though, in '74, the first day, the first event, who was on track? Like, what was your role? Are you in the booth? Are you on pit road?
No, I'm in the booth. I started out at the top.
So what was the race? What was the call? How was the show?
The race, we had competitors like Smokey Botwell. We had
was it a Sizzler?
Yes, it was. It was opening day. Yeah, it was. I was here for the Sizzler, the original Sizzler, right, and so forth with it. Dr. Dick. And so forth with it, and all of those, all those people were here. I witnessed that. I saw all that, how it worked, and you know what else happened here, guys? And Kyle, you know this. This speedway literally created and blessed names that stayed with people. Mr. Excitement originated right here at this racetrack. Okay?
A lot of names did.
Yeah, a ton of names,
Yep.
And
Bouchard's nickname.
Yes, the Wassa Wassa Kid, right? All of these things, they came out of here. And the reason they came out of here and the reason that it happened is the family that runs the place, and I'm not sucking up, the family that runs the place, okay, they allowed the announcers to do that. Yeah. They gave us the opportunity. So if we saw something, the 44, the car was referred to as Black Magic because it was black. Pulverari's car, they all had names. They all had unique factors, involved in all of that. And it didn't happen at other racetracks. The other thing that happened here, Kyle, you're so blessed that you didn't have to live this era.
Oh, boy.
The other thing is, one day, Jack Sr. said, way back, and your grandfather was really a classic guy, of prominence. He dressed a certain way.
Yeah, he did.
You know those plaid pants?
Yeah.
That now he wore those when they were in style. And he wore the right sweaters, and he had the look. He looked like a John Wayne movie star type
he
guy.
died, yeah.
Yeah, he had that air about him that said, pay attention when he walked into the room. He really did. And it wasn't fake. It wasn't phony. It was jackaroo, right? And it honestly was. So he comes up with the idea that all of us, and Jackie was right behind him on this, that we have to dress a certain way. So we ended up wearing white pants, white shoes, right, a red blazer, and a white shirt.
I think we bring it back.
Okay?
I think we bring it back.
Okay? Now, this is no lie. So Jackie, in his rebellious years, Jackie decided that the starters should wear white leisure suits in the beginning. So he had a white leisure suit, right? And then, you know, and you got to understand this whole era. Frankie Scambato Sr., I had such tremendous respect for the Scambato family. And Frankie Scambato Sr. was an awesome guy. And I can tell the story. In those days, no men really wore a toupee. He had the most elaborate toupee you ever saw. It didn't move. It was awesome. Yeah. And he stood on that starter stand with his red coat and everything else like he was the ringmaster in a circus. He was so unbelievable. He was so colorful. He was so creative. And then his wingman was Chris Hopkins. Yep. Hey, now, here's a weird story about Chris Hopkins. If you know anything about Chris Hopkins, he's a neat freak. Now he lives in Florida. Great man. I have tremendous respect for him. He would come to the office. He would bring his white pants that were pressed, and he would not sit down because he didn't want to crease them. And I'm like, are you kidding me? What is wrong with that man, right? And he would say, oh, I'm not sitting down. I'll crease these. I won't look good on the starter stand. Who cares what you look like, I'd say. And he'd say, oh, no, that's the way it is. So that was our official outfit. I mean, that's what all announcers did, you know, and so forth with it. And that was your dad. I mean, we looked like the owner of the facility. You know, we really did. And so forth with it. So we did that for a lot of years. Then other tracks tried to copy. You know, they would have a blue blazer or a green blazer or whatever, right, and so forth with it. So that was really that part of that, to be honest with you.
Talk about my opening night, you making me comfortable as the new kid. Who made you comfortable? Your first night here, your first season here at Stafford?
I have to say, to be honest with you, it would be a combination. Jackie did, because you got to understand, and once I let this out, he's going to be so mad. A lot of people are under the opinion that Jackie and I totally hate each other. We don't get along. We have staged some of the most horrific battles at different facilities and things to make people think that we hate each other's guts, and we don't. We're very good friends, and we get along very, very well, and so forth with it. But Jackie was instrumental in the beginning. He was my coach. He was instrumental, you know, and he was great at it. Jim Powers, the gentleman that was here on dirt, transitioned into the first race on asphalt. And I think Jim Powers has passed away since, so I can get away with this, I guess. But Jim Powers liked to have what he referred to as a toddy while he was announcing. Now, what that meant was that he had a beer guy that would bring him up a beer, like, you know, every caution, right? So at the end of the night, there'd be 200 cups on the counter, right, and so forth with it. And he'd go, oh, nothing ever happens at Stafford. Oh, of course not. You're drunk. How did you know nothing ever happens at Stafford, right? You know, so that was the deal, you know, and then your father saw that one night, and that was the end of that. That was gone, right, and so forth with it. Then we used to have the scorers. They were next to us. And the scorers, we had 3 scorers. And when the theme from Shaft came on, they would dance up in the booth. Well, your grandfather would be in the infield, and one night he looked up and he saw that. And he came flying. It was like, throw a caution, stop the show, it's over with, all right? And he came upstairs and he told them there's no dancing, there's no moving, there's no nothing. You're here as a professional and you're going to act professional. And boy, it was a night to remember. It really honestly was.
When did Shaft start here? Do you know that? When did that become the thing?
I think Shaft started right around 1975, 76. And so forth with it, and it was an instant success. Jackie was behind that. It's not
the most random song
it is
ever.
And think about the genetics of it. How long it's still pertinent today.
Yeah.
You know, there are so many new things and new wave music and everything else that you would think, oh God, it would be.
And they made a remake of Shaft not too long ago.
They did. So it was really fantastic, you know, and so forth with it. And it was a tradition, and you know, every announcer that worked could. Don't ask me to sing it, guys, because I'm not going to do it. But I know every word because you heard it so many times, you know, and so forth with it. So
so all the years, you know, we
Yes.
start here in the 70s. We're now in 2020.
Yes,
I mean, the sport has changed so dramatically.
unbelievably.
You've seen a lot of things. Like, how is, you know, what do you make of that? Like the transition of the cars, the drivers, the people, the fans, the waves of the crowds growing, and now I think we're kind of back on an upswing again.
We are on an upswing.
And the tracks come, the tracks go. Like, what do you make of all the changes? Is it good? Is it bad? Was it better in 1970, or you know?
The answer is no. It was not better. Everybody in their mind, no matter what we're talking about, when you're old, and I'm old, guys. Okay, I'm old. Don't mistake that, right? And so forth. You always think when you were. It's like the snow story. Well, the snow was this high off the ground.
Yeah.
No, you were that tall. What's the matter with you, right? And so forth. It's, you know, everybody's in their mind says it, and I even say it at times and so forth with it. But the truth of the matter is, and I would like to say this, and I just want to take a second, guys, to say this. I was blessed to be the man that ran Riverside Park Speedway. I took it from a time that it was going to be going out of business, and I brought it, and I'm not bragging, and please, anybody watching this, don't take this wrong. I took it to an all-time high level. Then there was a scandal, and I left, and then I got thrown over at another facility, which was Thompson, that had a problem. Okay? It was the Polar Beverage people, da-da-da-da-da. I worked behind the scenes and built that up. Then I got thrown out on my ass again. So a generation change, they call it. I call it something a little more different than that, right? But and so forth with it. So I was a part of that, a part of racing. And at the same time, I was blessed because I came here every Friday night and I saw how other people did my job. And I learned from your family, Paul. I learned from young announcers like Kyle Rickey, the do's, the don't, and so forth with it. I believe, in my mind, today, the race programs that Stafford Speedway is presenting, in the style that it's presenting it, and it's, you know, lots of times you and I, we all joke about this. Team Stafford. Not a joke to me. It's a real deal. You know, this race program is a tremendous success. At the end of every night when I close out on the microphone, I'm the last guy that talks. Until the last race of this year, I wasn't the last guy. So, but previous to that, I've been the last guy every time.
Wait, who spoke last this year?
Matt Buckler did, because I had to go to Victory Lane.
Oh, we'll get
that's
there.
right.
We'll get there. That's okay. So there was a good reason.
I had to go to Victory Lane.
You gave Matt his moment.
Yes. So and so forth with it. But the truth is, and I always say the same thing, right? You know, want to thank everybody on behalf of Mark Arute, Lisa Arute, Paul Arute, and David Arute. It is the truth. During this COVID situation, the first racetrack that stepped forward and said, we're not going to let this beat us. We're going to move forward. We're going to take this in a positive motion was not this facility. It was Team Stafford under the direction of, and I'm going to say it again, Paul Arute, Lisa Arute, Mark Arute, and David Arute. Okay? Every one of those people brought, in one case, brought years of experience. In another case, brought the concept of handling the public, which is what your mother is brilliant at doing, Paul. Okay? And then,
she's a real boss.
And then you came, you raised the bar really high. I'm not sucking up to you, but you really did, right? So
everyone's going to think this is a puff beat. I hired Ben here.
You know, and David David is amazing. I mean, David can do anything. He really can,
yeah.
right? And he does so many things behind the scenes people don't know, and I know, and you guys know. He's an amazing guy, right, and so forth. So you brought something to the house, right? And when I say the house, you brought something to racing here in the Northeast. You now, be honest, guys. I got a question for you. I get to interview you now.
Me?
This is pretty good.
Oh, boy.
Okay. Did it seem like, as you look back at 2020, that things were any different here at Stafford?
No.
Yeah, it did. Like when we finally got the doors open, it felt like, oh, hey, it's back. We're back.
It's back.
I mean, outside of a couple of PA announcements, you know, just reminding people of the state of the world.
Exactly.
Everything was
Exactly. And now I go everywhere, as you know that. I don't have a life. When you're old, you have to do these things, right? So I go everywhere. You know, I've been to every racetrack around here. You know, I've announced to more racetracks than probably anybody on this earth, right? I see how they do their programs. I'm not knocking them. I'm not saying this, that, or the other. But it wasn't the same. When you went there was this tension. You know, should I wear a mask? Should I not wear a mask? Am I close enough? Is it okay? Is it not okay? You know, and so forth. And some did a great job. I'm not saying not all of them did. Some did a great job. So, you know, that part of it I think is amazing, and a real credit here.
And I will just to go on that. It's all about the people that we have here. I mean,
it's a team.
It's
That's
unbelievable.
That team Stafford.
I mean, it's unbelievable.
It is.
Between Tommy and the crew in the pits, between Jeremy and everybody up doing the pay-per-view, the TV. I mean, the track crew does an amazing job. It's endless.
It is, and you're totally right. And I just want to touch on that. You know, every Friday night we're announcing, Matt and myself and Kyle and you know and doing what we're doing. We could not do that job if it wasn't for people like Jeremy.
Yeah.
Okay. And we have an amazing chemistry with those people. We joke, we laugh behind the scenes. You have to have that.
Yeah.
It can't come in and be uncomfortable and yes, sir, yes, ma'am, and all of that stuff. Sometimes we make mistakes. Sometimes things don't go the way it's supposed to. We fix it. We move on. You know, we get our butts chewed out sometimes, but we still continue to deliver. This isn't over yet. Wait till I really get going. So
let's jump back a bit, though. So you touched on the park.
Yes.
I think that's something that's very close to a lot of people, a lot of drivers, a lot of teams, a
Absolutely.
lot of fans. Todd Owen really explained, I think he nailed it. And he said when that place closed, it was like the end of the world for a lot of people. And he put it good. He's like, imagine if Stafford closed tomorrow.
Correct.
Like, well, yeah, what would you do with yourself?
Yeah.
So start from the beginning there. How did you get involved there? And, you know, talk about your time there. I mean, that place is people's life is the Riverside Park.
We could go with a whole different show on that, to be honest with you. But how that really came about was Mike Joy. Mike Joy was the announcer at Riverside. The reason everybody wanted to be the announcer at Riverside, it was for a weekly racetrack, the highest paid position of any. You know, back in I'm not going to say the number. Everyone wants to know the number, right? And it was like, I will say this, 3 times the amount that you get here at Stafford, Paul.
Oh, there you go. Now it's coming out.
But, you know, so Mike Joy is going on to bigger and better things. So he calls me up and he goes, you got to do this for me. You got to take this thing over. So I go there just as announcer. What I don't realize at the time that I go there as an announcer, the Carroll family hired a consultant firm from Texas. And the consultant firm came in, looked at the numbers of the racetrack, and said, this is no longer worthwhile to do. We're going to take it out, and we're going to put, you heard this story a million times, we're going to put a roller coaster in there. That'll make us some money. So I come in, and I'm announcing and everything else, and there was a gentleman by the name of Gene Murphy from Enfield, Connecticut. He was an older guy, smart guy. He was what they called a controller, one of the board of directors. And he came to me, and he said, do you think you could save this thing? I know you know a lot about racing. And I said, yeah, I think I can. But I says, you know, I don't want to be the front guy. I want to be the back guy. So you be the front guy and I'll be the back guy. And I changed everything. There was a gentleman by the name of Ralph Autokirk that ran the facility from Albany because they had a strike there and the place literally got shut down. The competitors ripped the fence down and everything. It really was.
The drivers went on strike.
Yeah. It was a real problem, right? And so forth. So then I did crazy things. and I was young. I was ballsy in plain English. So I did crazy things there that nobody ever thought of doing. I mean, your grandfather, even your father, were furious. I let the owners and drivers in for free. I considered them, this was my pitch. They're like Frank Sinatra. They're the entertainment. We can't charge the entertainment. We wouldn't charge Frank Sinatra to go on stage. Well, your grandfather wanted to hang me from the center of the infield on that one, right? But the worst thing that I ever did, it was based on the economic times and based on the cost of racing and the concept of the SK Modified Racing, they decided to replace Modifieds with the SK Modified division. Mm-hmm. Well, being young and arrogant, as I sometimes can be, right, I started a whole ad campaign and referred to the cars that ran at Riverside, which were basically what we would call today Tour-type Modifieds, as real Modifieds. Come Saturday nights to see real Modified racing. Ooh, that got your grandfather, your father, and the entire bloodline of the Aroots boiling, right, and so forth with it. And later we laughed about it and so forth. So I did crazy things. I mean, I had entertainment. I couldn't guarantee what would happen on the racetrack, so I would create things, and I would have showgirls, and I would have spotlights, and I would do crazy things, and everybody else would think I was nuts, but it all worked, right, and so forth with it. And it was a tremendous success. The numbers were huge. Most short tracks in America. NASCAR voted it as, I think, and I'm not saying this to sound arrogant or cocky at all, but voted it as the number one short track in America in that time. And, I got, I think, every award you could possibly ever get from it and so forth with it. And, I had a situation that I prefer not to go into, but I would go into. I'd do a whole different show on that because no one's ever asked, and it would be a great question. What really happened at the end? Because what happened at the end is I was considered a bad guy, and I was considered of wrongdoing, and and I was thrown out. And my replacements took the most successful short track in America and put it out of business in 3 years. So it was gone. Okay, and if you stop and thought about it, it made no sense at all. It really doesn't make any sense, and so forth with it.
During the peak times, was there pressure from the Carrolls or whoever owned the property? Because they didn't sell it until after it closed, right?
And there's a big illusion about the racetrack at Riverside. Always people used to think the success of that racetrack was because of the amusement park. That was not true. The racetrack during my era was more successful than the amusement park. The amusement park was losing money hand over fist, and the racetrack was making money. So it was really just the opposite of that. But no, I credit the Carroll family for a lot of good things, and I credit them or discredit them for a lot of bad things in my case. But among the good things, when I went there and took this position, and maybe this was the problem that happened in the end, they said, you take it, you do whatever you want to with it, as long as it makes money and it's a success, we don't want to know. And the Carrolls raced just like Paul, you and your brother raced and everything else. And when competitors came over jawing at them about, they got mistreated, you know how it is, and so forth, they would say, listen, we don't run this place. We might own it. We don't run it. Go see Ben. And what he says is the final say. So they were wonderful like that. The next track that I ran, that was not the case, I want you to know. They had the final say, and I was the guy that executed and tried to accomplish it from the best way that I could,
How long into your promoting of Riverside did you really know you could do this?
I think I knew it after the first year.
Okay.
Yeah.
What happened that first year that said, hey, this fits me?
Right. Because I'm not going to say I didn't. I liked the creative power of it. And I think you could understand that, Paul. Yeah. Right?
Do whatever you want.
You could, yes. To
and
be able to do it.
Don't do it again.
Exactly. And if it flopped, it was okay to not do it again. Not you had to answer to somebody, you had to go and explain you're doing and everything else, and so forth with it. So I don't know. I really, I think right from the beginning, if we were talking about if you had to do your life all over, would you do it differently? I'm going to tell you the truth. and I've said this to only one other individual. I was offered an opportunity to come to this racetrack, right, in a high position by a gentleman who was the manager at that time, which was Ed Yarrington, and I turned it down. And the reason that I turned it down, I was a young man, and I was at Riverside, and the reason that I turned it down was the fact that I didn't like the direction at that time that he was going with it. Mm-hmm. And I don't discredit him or say anything bad, but I just didn't like it. It wasn't what I wanted it to be.
Someone else in this office still had that same opinion.
Yeah, yeah.
Someone that's still here has that same opinion. Yeah, that's kind of where the ship turned at Stafford.
Yes, yeah. So I didn't. Then when the ship turned, okay, it wasn't a ship, it was a vessel. When that vessel turned, okay, and so forth with it, then I probably, if I was asked, I would have came here. But I didn't get asked. So, and it was no big deal, and so forth with it, because I like creative things, and so forth with it.
Do you think if you had to promote a track in today's environment, you'd be able to jump back in and pick it up?
In a heartbeat. Yeah. In a heartbeat. There's no question about it. One of the things, Paul, that I am most shocked about, and I understand why it happened, but I am the most shocked about, I have some pretty admirable credentials, okay, in the promoting business and in running racetracks and so forth with it. Because of a friend of mine sending out a press release to keep his job at Thompson Speedway that said that I retired, everybody assumed that I retired. I did not retire, okay? So, I would have loved to went someplace else. That was in 2012. Matter of fact, I remember the date. It was December 23rd, 2012, when I was told by, the matriarch of the family that my services was no longer rendered because he had turned the facility over. It was a generation change, and the younger generation had no use for me. Let's put it on the table and tell it like it is. So it was like, okay, that's the end of the story. But the fact that they said that I retired, I could never shake that off. I didn't want to retire. I didn't feel like I should retire. I thought, based on my credentials, that I would have had opportunities at other short tracks in America, which I loved. But I really never got those chances. I really didn't. Yeah. I get called for advice every day of the week. I really do.
I think it's interesting that I think a lot of people, will purchase a racetrack or look to go into the business or inquire about buying a track, and they don't really realize how difficult it is to be successful in it.
It takes a certain type of an individual.
It's kind of a lot of counterintuitive things that you would say, as a fan, that's stupid. Yep. He's just like somebody who sits in the stands. Why are there only 8 late models on the track? Right. This is stupid. Get rid of them.
Yeah.
But then you have to have the the consistency and the the balls, I guess, for to quote you.
Yes.
To say, no, these are staying here.
Yes.
And next thing you know, you got a guy like an Andrew Moeller who just announced he's going to drive a late model at Stafford, and we'll have 25 cars this year.
Yep.
I mean, if the fans were the ones who ran the show, it would be a little different. But
one of the biggest things that always drives me insane, everybody always says this, how many cars? Like the whole results of the program is determined by how many cars. No, this isn't a little kid's game with Matchbox cars. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. This is reality. You can have 25 cars and have the best race program, and you can have 15 cars and have the best race program. It's called racing. It's called competitiveness. It's called competition. And it builds a foundation of all of that. But we got into that rut, all of us. Car count. You hear that everywhere you go. How many cars? Well, you know what? Some guys bring 3 junkers that don't even race. They just put them on the racetrack. That doesn't matter to me. I would rather see quality cars in the process of it all. So, I believe that the late model division is a tremendous story.
And the racing was excellent this year.
Tremendous story.
8 different winners.
Yeah, tremendous story. And what makes that such a great story is there is a history at this racetrack when the pro stock division got thrown out, and they did, Okay.
Oh, we talked all about it on a
did.
couple episodes here.
Yeah, they
Doug
did.
Kobe was he loved talking about that.
Oh,
so did Todd.
Yeah. So it got thrown out, and reality is it got thrown out, right? But the real story that came out of that was, and I quote, the Arute families are modified people. They don't like full-bodied racing, right? Which was so far from the truth, it was ridiculous. It really honestly was. So when you blend that back together and you put it together and you watch what happened with the late models, it was a natural situation. Every division in the Northeast, the car counts went down. You know that, Paul. Mm-hmm. Okay? And the people that stuck with the original programs, like you people did, they're grown back up. They're better than ever. Am I right, Kyle? You go to a lot of races.
I don't know how many times I've said it. Like, consistency is everything.
Yep. It is.
We're not going to change things.
Yes.
If you just quit on a thing after a year or 2 years or 3 even, how can anyone – like, it doesn't matter if we're driving 1920 Model Ts as long as we're consistent with what we're doing.
Exactly.
It's a race. A race is a race.
It is. And you know what's so unique about – we're getting all over the place here.
I like it.
But what's so unique about the late models here at this racetrack, and people don't know this, but I do because I go visit everybody. I'm like a little gossip, right, and so forth with it. This division has more recycled cars than any division at Stafford.
It's awesome.
And that's a good thing, okay, because we take fabrication people like Joe Ham, Bob Phil, all these people, and they recycle this equipment. And then somebody else gets it, right? And that person puts their spin on it, And then we have the driver process that you're talking about. We have seasoned veteran drivers that have literally made a career of running this division, and they're fantastic drivers. Tommy Fern's a great driver. Michael Bennett's a great driver. Go through that list.
Adam Gray.
Gray. They're great drivers. So when you look at all of this, and you see that, and then you throw in these new guys, and then you throw in the Paul Arutes and those guys, because they're in the second tier now. They're literally biting on the ass of the veterans.
All of those guys are like, I feel like my program is just like one good season away from firing off 4 victories. Ryan Byrne could come in and sweep the season.
Exactly.
Al Saunders and Brother
Perfect
Cliff.
example. Those guys they go under the radar all the time. They're incredible drivers.
And they are the definition of a Stafford
They absolutely
ladder.
are.
They started in the Dare Stocks.
Absolutely.
Spent a long time there, a long time in the Limiteds, and they just go up the ladder. And what's cool about it now is that these recycled cars, there's not any available anymore.
No.
So we've taken all these cars back out of the garages. They're back on the track, and now a guy like Joe Ham is putting together new cars for a guy like an Andrew Duran.
And then let me tell you something. Yeah,
it's working.
It's working the whole cycle. And you look at this division of race cars. You've got Rob Russell Racing. Those guys, they're fabricators. They're builders. They built with Teddy Marsh. They built at the upper level.
A nice car.
They do. And then you got Joe Ham. Now Joe Ham is a friend of mine. Been a lifetime friend of mine and so forth. He's a tremendous fabricator, tremendous welder. Bob Phil, tremendous, okay? Bob Phil spent his whole life, his whole business originates from winning late models, okay? You can't make that. Somebody just can't go and say, I'm going to make a late model for Stafford. Okay, it doesn't work that way. These are people that understand the geometry, everything about those race cars. And that's why that division works. It really does.
So let's get back on the Ben Dodge track because I do love it. Ben knows everything about everything at Stafford, which is amazing. Of all the races you've ever seen at Stafford, is there a race that is the most memorable? I mean, I have a race that in my opinion, is the most of all time here, but what's yours?
That's really, really tough because the answer that I would probably say is the most current answer, but that would be very unfair to because it's not. I can honestly say that I don't really look at them in that way. There are specific things, and I think, Kyle, you would agree with me on this. There are specific things on a specific night that I like. Right, that I remember that was outstanding, right, and so forth with it. I'm going to say
memorable.
My most memorable night was our tribute night to Teddy Christopher.
I was going to say that's got to be it.
Yeah.
For me
That's
too.
up there for me.
Yeah, it was.
Eerie. What an eerie feeling.
Yes, it was. And not only that, everybody came together without communicating and created a blessing. That's what I call it, right? And it was just like we had rehearsed it a million times, and we knew exactly what was going to happen. No, if you listen to the tapes of that night, if you watch it, if you look at it, if you were there, there's nothing like it anymore. Nothing. It's
People
amazing.
just didn't. They just stayed here, and then when they pulled the car down, and
and it
was
nothing
mob
was
scene
nothing was planned exactly the way it came out.
Just kind of happened.
Yeah, it just did, and that quietness, and then that from dead silence to that like explosion of people clapping and so forth.
Cool.
The emotions of Keith Rocco, the emotions of the fans, that you saw people crying and people people showing up with. I saw more Teddy Christopher items on people that I hadn't seen in years. You know, they all was there for the right reason, and that reason was so special, and that is etched in my mind forever. It really is. And you know, to be fair, we're talking about the best nights, not to be a downer, but my worst night at Stafford Speedway for announcing ever was the night that Corky Cookman's car went into the grandstand. It was an unbelievable night and a situation. My mother had worked here at the Speedway. She was in charge of ticket sales in the office, and the accident occurred. The car ended up in the grandstand, and it was a freak thing, total freak thing. And I remember coming down. I remember quieting the people down and telling them, please stay back, and all of this, and handled it all well. I remember Ed Yarrington, who was in charge, calling me on the phone, crying and saying, you know, you've got to ask these people to leave. This is terrible. I don't know what I'm going to do. Remember coming to the office. Remember in the office, it was literally like a hospital emergency room. There was people that were in shock, lying on the floor, right? There were people that had minor cuts and everything else. And you know, thank God no one got killed or anything of that type. But it was just so unbelievable and horrific of that night. And it was a shock. It happened in a matter of a few seconds. Nobody could have ever trained anybody to handle it or anything else. And that was the worst night here ever. You know, it really honestly was. And so forth with it. So,
all right, let's get back on the positive. As we talk, we've talked a couple of times about promotions and this podcast, the Bottom Shot podcast, kind of the next generation of video entertainment for the internet. I want to talk about your show because you kind of were one of the originals as far as video and promotion of what we do up here in the Northeast on your TV show, Race Week. Yeah.
The show Race Week came out of the fact that we originated it because TV Tim, who was Tim DeRoyne, was working at then called Continental Cable.
Yep.
And he was working there, and he said to me, you know, I'd like to do a show kind of like what Matt Buckler was doing at the same location, to be honest with you. So I went there and I did this show and so forth with it, and we were done. Tim said, you know, you're really pretty good at this. You're pretty knowledgeable at this. He goes, you know, if I had the funding, we could do this all the time. I have a connection with which at that time was NESN, New England Sports Network, right, and so forth with it. I said, well, set the thing up and we'll go talk to him. So I went and talked to him. I bought all the equipment. And we started to do it. We did 375 half-hour episodes.
Was it a weekly show?
Weekly show. And it was unique in the fact that we opened the show at a different location, sometimes not even racetracks, just any place. You know, I can remember standing on 91 and saying all roads lead to Stafford, you know, and so forth because there was a race at Manhattan. No matter what the short track was in our area, we covered it. And we did it we filmed it live, and then we edited it, and I called it just like I was doing it live at the racetrack, and so forth with it. And it was a tremendous program, way ahead of its time, and people loved it, but the system didn't like it. And what I mean by the system didn't like it is NASCAR did not like it because they couldn't control it.
Yeah.
They could not.
That's the problem we have now.
Yeah, they could not control it, so it made it very, very difficult. And
so did they kind of like not allow some of the
video?
you
couldn't use their footage, you couldn't use this.
Really?
Yeah. So what we would have to do is we would have to backdoor it. We would go to the promoter and say, this is your decision, it's your facility. Do you want us to cover this?
Right. And they would all say yes.
And they would say yes, right? And well, some would not say, but most would say yes, right? So that's how we were able to do it. And and that upset NASCAR even more in those days. It really did, So, so it was good. There's another part of this that people don't remember. I was a PR director for the NASCAR Wheel and Modify Tour.
Really?
When it was the NASCAR Featherlight Modify Tour. And nobody realizes that and so forth with it. Yeah, I've got thrown out of some of the best places you can imagine. I've had some pretty good
jobs. You and Jackie are similar.
We are two birds of a feather, me and Jackie, that's for sure.
And so I agree with Kyle. That was way ahead of its time. It's almost pretty much what we're doing now with the podcast, with Bonce's content that he goes to shops and
amazing young man.
Stuff.
That's the same thing.
What do you make of where the accessibility is going now with our live streaming from Stafford Speedway TV to all that? There's so much from this podcast. I mean, we can produce as much content as we really as we choose to, and I think it's amazing. I would love to get your opinion on it, your thoughts.
My opinion of this is all the best thing that ever happened. Okay, because what we're doing is we are showing the reality of our business from behind the scenes. Okay, and in today's population of reality television, this is exactly what we're doing.
It's literally reality TV every Friday night.
Yes, it is.
Yep. You can't make the stories up. You literally can't make it up.
And you can't take it back.
Yeah.
Whatever I say or Matt says, even if it's wrong, we can't take it back. So it's live reality television.
Oh, you're live now.
You know what I'm saying? It really honestly is. So I think it's good. What I don't like, which is not to do with this, I think this is tremendous, and I'm totally in support of this, right? But what I don't like is and it's happening all across the country and all across the world, the Twitter backstabbing, the false stories. Because once they're out there, they're reality.
Social media stuff.
Right. And some of it's very, very good. Don't get me wrong. But some of it just is over the top. They just don't know the facts.
Yeah.
And so forth with it. So
it's easy. It's kind of like how I said about the late models. It's easy to come to a conclusion and have no information. But what I kind of started doing is I comment back to people when I hear the roots suck. You know what?
Yeah.
I go, it's come talk to me anytime. Here's the phone number to the office. You got a problem, call me. And if I ever actually talk to these people, to 180. It's an immediate 180.
Let me tell you something.
Explain for 1 second, and it's over.
For years and years and years, I had my own radio show. And I don't mean a radio show like that was Mickey Mouse. Big-time radio show. I had a syndicated radio show at one time and everything else.
What were you talking about?
Right? Talking
about race cars?
Racing every Monday night.
Oh, racing. Okay.
Yeah. So one of the tricks of the trade that I learned in the process is it was call-in. So I would have people call in and they would bitch about something that happened, right? They would say, oh, yeah, Stafford favors Teddy Christopher. That was a phony thing, blah, 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 and so forth with it. And I would immediately come back with this line. I know who you are. I had no idea who I was talking with, right? Well, if you think you got that problem, then why don't you talk to me face to face, right? And the listeners would go, wow, I like that. Now, I got to tell you, this is a great story concerning perhaps one of the best scorers in the business. I'm not going to say one of because they're a team. There's two of them that works here at Stafford. Judy Clinty is an amazing scorer, an amazing individual. And her partner in crime is Russ Smith. Yep. This is the God's honest truth story how Russ Smith became a scorer. You can even ask him. I'm at Riverside, and his Uncle Dan, which is Dan Avery, his Uncle Dan has a problem on the racetrack, and it's through scoring. They came back to the finish line. It was a red checker. They should have went back to the last scored lap and so forth. He calls me up during the week and he says, my name is Russ Smith, and this is what's wrong. That finish was not right and so forth. So I make the mistake of saying, if you think you can do this and you're so good at it, then why don't you show up on
awesome.
Saturday and I will put you to work. Guess what? He showed up. He never left. He never left. And he became one of two of the very best in the business.
Yeah.
Okay?
That's all. I did not know that.
Yeah, that's a true story. So these are the type of things that come out of that, right? They really honestly do, and so forth with it. But that was my trick. I pretend I knew them, and then they would go,
It's easy on social media because they have their name there. You go,
yes.
Hey, so-and-so. Like, I'll grab them in the pits and I'll say, if you got a problem with this, I'm right here.
Yeah.
Or if you got a problem with the rules, Tom Fox is the most available person in technical and
yeah.
See, I mean?
Tommy Fox used to drive for me also.
Really?
And,
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. It was very good too, exceptionally good, and so forth. And we were personal close friends at a time that I was going through a whole bunch of stuff, and he was just excellent. He's a great guy, So I know Tommy, and I know his ability to communicate, and he's excellent. Forget about racing. Yeah. He just has that ability to communicate, listen, answer, move forward, take the positives and negatives and all of that stuff. Scott Tapley, the most difficult job in the house, I always say this, is why would anybody want to be the race director?
I have no idea.
You don't get paid a lot of money and you get bitched at every time, every lap of the race. You're never right. Everything is wrong. But God bless them that we have people like Scott Tapley with their talents that want to do the job, because it is the toughest job, in the house and so forth with it. But we have an amazing cast of characters here, and I don't mean that like a bad way, but we do.
It's unbelievable. And so to continue on the changing of the sport over the years, what do you make of the racing today compared to what it was?
You got to understand,
or to what it has been.
You got to understand something. I've been announcing the World Series of Speedway Racing at New Smyrna since it began. I think it's the 53rd year or something.
So you've been to every one?
I've announced every single one of them.
Didn't know that.
And I have announced all over. No matter, you can say a racetrack, and I've announced there at one time or another. It seems like that's not bragging. It's just reality of the way that it is. So credential-wise, that gives me the right to make the statement that I'm about to make, okay? It's not politically oriented. It's not any of the above. The best racing in any division in America, and I'll go right on the table with this, is the SK Modified division here at Stafford. And the first runner-up is the SK Light Modified division, okay? And then I would go, if I have to go to a third, a win, place, and show, then I would have to go with the open style tour type modified races.
Those have been awesome.
Because they're sprints.
Yeah.
And that's what makes them magical. Okay? Yeah. They're not drawn out, who gets out on pit road, who does this, it's like you're on the edge of your seat, guess what's going to happen next, and you don't know. And you don't know until the final turn of the final lap.
How about the drivers? You mentioned there was the cast of characters when the first time you came here. I know. I think what a lot of people do is say now is the characters aren't there, and when I get that comment, I go, I don't think that's true. It makes me feel like we don't tell the story enough, which I think this is why we do podcasts and why we do more, and hopefully we can do a more interaction with the fans next season without COVID gone. Hopefully the COVID's gone, and I would like to hear your opinion on, are the characters, were they that much better then?
No. The answer is no. And I'll go into details. Before I do that, though, I want to emphasize something that most people don't realize. Okay? And not many of the new announcers do this, by the way. They're all handed sheets, and they read off the sheets. Okay? Any given night at any given racetrack in the Northeast, this young man next to me, Kyle Rickey, is walking in the pit area, talking to the competitors. People would say, and I've had people say this to me, people say to me, why does Ben Dodge stand at the back gate and stamp people's hands? That doesn't make any sense. Well, it makes perfectly good sense to Ben Dodge. You know why?
Because you're talking to
Because
everybody.
I'm talking to every person.
Yep.
I'm getting the story.
Yeah.
The guy's telling me about what happened this week. I look at him. I can tell by looking at him because I see him every week. He's something's wrong. Maybe it's a family situation. Maybe it's something else.
Or something's good. Yeah,
Yes.
It could be the other way too.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's Matt Buckler. We all know that Matt has health issues. God bless Matt Buckler.
Mm-hmm.
He never gives up. He keeps going, and he gets those stories.
Every week.
Those personalities, those little details, okay? And that's what makes a difference. It really honestly does.
So do you think the personalities are similar? I mean, everyone goes, you look at the wall over here, you got Flemke, DeSaro, Richie Evans, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're the three of the all-time greatest, right?
See, I could get in such trouble because I could dissect those people that we just said, and then I would be the most hated person in short track racing.
Don't do that, yeah.
Right? And so forth. But the truth of the matter is, and if somebody was being honest, I want you to bring up a picture of the Evans operation and study the picture. Study what the people look like, the drivers look like, the car look like, and everything else. Then I want you to bring up a modern-day picture, and then look. You'll see the comparison, and you'll understand why the sport has evolved in such a positive way. That's not knocking the Richie Evans era or any of those, right? That was the time. That's what everybody would look like and what they did. When I first started announcing here, I had hair to my shoulders. You know what I'm saying? Because that was the style. So, and I, everybody used to smoke cigarettes. Winston was a sponsor. Now you're forbidden to smoke cigarettes. So, the times change. I will say this, though. Most of when they changed the age group and they said younger individuals can be a part of the sport, 14, 15 years old, I'm not so sure that transition was always good in the beginning. I think it allowed a lot of people who had wealthy parents, let's be honest, to come and play and do things. And very sadly, and I remember this actually happening, and Kyle and I had this conversation one day. I went to a young driver, and he was in the pit area, and his dad was working on the race car. And another lady was here who I found out was the mother. And I went over to the dad and I said, "Is your son around?" And the dad said to me, "Who are you?" And I said, "I'm Ben Dodge, the announcer. I'd like to talk to him." Right? He goes, "Well, he's got information online. Go and take a look." I said, "Well, I'm right here right now."
Oh, boy.
And not only that, I'm not good with that stuff. So, is there somebody else I can talk to? No. Okay. Right? So I look around. Nobody's around except the guy and his wife, da-da-da-da-da, and so forth. At the end of the night, I'm walking back to the paddock area. Here comes this same exact woman that I saw next to that car. She happens to be the mother of this driver. And she goes up one side of me and down the other. "Why didn't you talk about my son? Why didn't you tell this story? Why didn't you do that?" I said, "Because I was there, standing next to you and your husband, looking for information. I had no information. I can't tell things that I don't know." Okay? Now, let's reverse it and go back to the old days. That would have never happened with a Richie Evans, a Bugsy Stevens, or any of them.
Accessible.
They were down to earth. They tell you a good story, a dirty story, a joke. They were there to be a part of it.
We've learned that. Yes.
Oh yeah. He's great. He's great. So that's the difference with it. Now the other part of it is because of social media and so forth with it. Let's be honest. We have so many talented individuals competing at this racetrack. I'm not blowing smoke up anybody's butt, but we do.
Oh yeah,
okay?
I agree. They're best.
So, and we have success stories. Okay, we know who came from here. We have the Stephen Parks that went on, and now we've got the Ryan Priest that went on. We got all of that stuff. And I'm going to tell you something. Just people would naturally say that are going to watch this. They're going to say, "Oh yeah, that's all he talks about is chase down." Oh yeah. The fact of the matter is, that kid is extremely talented.
Yeah.
it's the old duck theory. He looks like a duck, acts like a duck, walks like a duck. He's even arrogant like those guys at the upper level at times. But if you get to know the real guy, it's a whole different guy, okay? Extremely talented and so forth with it. Keith Rocco is extremely talented. You can't take any of that away. Todd Owen is extremely talented.
I mean, there isn't anyone in the SK field that's not talented.
And then you got we call them the young guns, and we mentioned some of them before, the Molars, you go down through the other side of the pit area, and then you got the
Hodgkins.
Yes. Oh, Teddy Hodgson, totally sellable, totally marketable.
Absolutely.
Totally friendly.
Yep. Yeah.
And what about this? We never talk about this. Well, Kyle does. We have a fleet of female drivers.
It's unbelievable.
That no other racetrack in America has.
Which I don't understand. I mean, I think I know why, but why are there so many at Stafford, do you think? Oh, you've been to all the tracks. Why is it here? I think it's because we just, my mom is just always around. That's part of it. And we're just so, strict on, like, there's no fighting in the pits here. There's no BS. When there's a problem, you're out of here. I mean, there's no fight. I mean, we don't put up with that.
And you know what else? I think, I agree with everything you said. And the number one thing I was going to say is your mom.
Yeah,
I really was.
I think so too.
Right. But the other part of this is the discipline factor. You are not going to be treated any different if you were a female driver or a male driver.
Exactly.
Okay, and that's a huge thing. Because Kyle, you see it at the upper level.
Yep.
The Dana story is like that. Treated different than everybody else.
Absolutely.
That doesn't work here. You have to earn the respect.
And they're good too. They're very good drivers. They're all good.
They're all good. They really are good. They're amazing. I mean, I think sometime we should have a race with just those 8 or 6 drivers and see what would happen. And so on with it, because they are. And
there's always additional drivers coming now. There's Cadence.
Yes,
Cadence Delorge is a new one.
Yes.
Out of karts. I mean, that's the karts too. The karts are a great ladder into the system.
And you think that's where Amanda West came from?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's where Alexandra came from.
Yes.
So that Monday night program.
Yes, it is. It's very, very, very good and very prevalent, to be honest with you. So, no, I think I think there's stories. I think it's our job.
Yeah.
Us to go and get those stories and those people.
Yeah.
And the other part of it is you have to make people feel comfortable in your house. And that's what happens here. I think there is an illusion that says, oh, my God, it's Stafford Speedway, if you've never been here. But then when you walk through the gate and then you meet these personalities and you meet these people, then the whole program changes.
I'd agree with that. I think it's very intimidating for someone who's never been here. Right, it's Stafford. It's the Palace. Right.
Yeah.
My grandfather always said they'll always come back to the Palace. They want to race the Palace. Right.
Yeah.
But when you come here and you commit to it, if you commit to Stafford for a season, we'll commit to you for that's it. That's all it takes.
Yeah. And I think there, that raising of the bar. Okay, it is definitely here, but it's at all different levels. Okay, so you can come here and your first goal is, I just want to qualify. Then once you qualify, the next bar is, I just want to finish. Then when you finish, it's, I just want to finish better and all of that. It's not like somebody's going to turn, you come here in your first night and you're going to spin out. And somebody's going to come over and say, don't come back.
Yeah.
No, somebody's going to say, how can we help you? And that's a credit to the competitors that run here. And they do that.
I see that, but I don't think it's enough at times because it's so competitive here.
Well, you got to understand,
I think it's just,
too.
The competitiveness here is unbelievable.
Yeah, and the other part of it, too, is the time factor. This is run like a well-oiled machine.
Yeah.
Okay? So when you're doing it like a well-oiled machine, there's not a lot of time to worry about what the other guy's doing.
That's true.
And unfortunately, with the COVID thing, it was impossible to do anyways, and so forth with that. So, I think our competitors today are amazing. I think there's great stories, and so forth with it. I go around and I visit a lot of people in their garages and talk to them, and I think I'm an odd duck in some ways, and I think Todd best showed it when you guys did the podcast with him, and he let out the secret that he goes, Ben's my friend, but he's never easy on me. Okay? And I'm like that on everybody. I really mean that. Because if I see something in them then I want to try to give them my opinions and my help to enhance them, to make them better at what they do, and so forth with it. And then they all move on and they all go, and so forth with it. I mean, I had a lot of different drivers. Eddie DeHaan, who was the spotter for Chase Elliott and was the spotter for Jeff Gordon, drove for me. And, he was the worst driver there ever was. Absolutely the worst driver there ever was. Now, when they talk about Eddie DeHaan, he's a superstar, but he was absolutely the worst driver there ever was, and so forth with it. But, those people moved on. Bruce D'Alessandro, who drove for me, who is one of my closer friends, he had a lot of success with me and my race team during the heyday of all of that. He moved down south, works for Gibbs.
Yep.
Has worked for Gibbs in a high-ranking position for a very, very long time. Still works for him. And so I have a lot of relationships with a lot of different people, and I'm not going to lie or exaggerate about it or feel bad about it. I met Chase Dowling here at the gate, right, and so forth with it, and he had did something wrong. This is several years back, and I took him aside and I said, that's not right. Don't do that. You made an ass of yourself. Mm-hmm. And he hated me. He didn't want to talk to me, right, and so forth with it. But then he got it, and we became close friends. And, now he just so happens to create the race team that I have, And then people want to know about that, and they say, why at close to 70, you're not in good health, why would you want to have a race car again? My answer is, why not?
I mean, that's a good answer. I would ask that question too, but I think that's a fair answer.
Right.
How cool was the win at the
It was
Classic?
Incredible. It was incredible. The reason that the win was so incredible for me is, and I'm being honest, is because of Chase, okay? Because Chase took this project on by himself. Yes, I financed it, and all of that stuff. And was I involved in the daily running of it? Yes, I was. But he had a goal, and he kept saying this goal when he was putting the car together. And the goal was, if I win a race at Stafford, you have to come down from the announcer's booth and stand next to me, because this would have never happened without you. And that's the real Chase Dowling that people don't know, and so forth with it. So we got to live that moment and that experience.
I think he's the favorite to win the Sizzler now, too. I think it's got to be. It's the exact same car.
Yeah. And the one thing that I have to emphasize in this and so forth with it, we talked about all these different people. Robbie Fuller, who now owns Troyer and owns LFR, he was on my race team as a kid. I bought him his first race car ever. I've known him all of his life, okay? We have conversations. He calls me. He talks to me about business and other things and everything else. When we decided to do this, he was supportive in doing the process of it. But the truth of the matter is, the car, which is the 9 car, and everyone says, why is it 9? Why isn't it 36? It isn't 36 because I sold Dave Zapienza all of his stuff years ago, and he's got the 36. So the 9 is my Eddie DeHaan cars were number 9, and then Chase's original number was number 9, right? So it was a natural thing for us to do in the process of it all. But it's not just your ordinary LFR car, and I think anybody that saw it race during that race that it won will tell you that. I mean,
it was good.
It's all his own creation and all of his own,
cool.
His own spin on it, and so forth with it. So, and I will tell you this: I can't tell you the story, so don't ask me. There are big things that are going to happen to Chase Dowling, and you can remember that I said that here first, that are in the works for 2020, and I think everybody's going to be shocked.
That's awesome, but I
forward to it.
Hope he's here every week is all I can say.
He will be here every week.
Okay.
He will be here every week.
I mean, he adds a great addition to the SK field.
He is going to run for the title this year. Was the goal last year, but unfortunately got hurt.
Yep.
No fault of his own, and so forth. Just one of those racing things. But
he's
definitely
got a shot at it, I think.
He is going to. Michael O'Sullivan, his father, Sonny O, drove for me also, right? So. He's an amazing guy, totally focused. Learned all his tricks from Teddy Christopher, and he's just a great guy. So that's going to be among the teams to beat, and so forth with it. I've had that conversation with Todd Owen and different people, and they all say that. I say, who's the top 3 teams? And that team always comes in that chart.
And I have one final question, but if
no, go ahead.
You have some to end the show,
yeah.
I think is my final.
And just
question.
like that, I was going to say we're an hour and 29 minutes into this.
You've seen a lot of drivers at a lot of tracks.
Yeah.
Who is the best driver you've ever seen compete?
Like it.
And that's how we'll end the show on that.
Oh, God, you're going to get me in so much trouble.
Not to pin you in the corner or anything.
You're going to get me in so much trouble because right now.
You can't say just now. all time. Okay.
Okay, help me out, Paul. Help me.
I'll give you two. I'll give you an up and coming, which is Chase.
100%.
Because I agree, he's very talented. I think there's a lot of he's done the ladder, he's done the SK
and
lights,
not because
he's shown it.
He drives for me. That doesn't.
No, I think everybody agrees. He's only two-time winner of the 5K, which is cool.
Yep.
He swept all the money shows this year.
Yes, he did.
But who is of all the drivers, from 1965 on, you must have or top three if you can't do one.
No, I can do one, and I was going to do this one and so forth with it. There's no question about it in my mind. Teddy Christopher. Okay? And I was a personal friend of Teddy's, as you guys know, a real personal friend. We joked, we talked, we communicated, we fought, we did crazy, bizarre things, and so forth with it. But he was magical. He really was magical. And the amazing part about Teddy is people don't realize we know how tragic it is, and we all say he died so young, and he did die young. But I think we sometimes overlook that at his age, the incredible driver that he was, that's something that's unbelievable today.
Arguably back on the upswing of his career. He won, 6 times that year?
Yes, exactly. That's the part that says if you doubt what I say, and you don't believe it, well, there's the facts that back it up. And it really is. The other thing about Teddy that made him such a great driver, he was not afraid to go where no man went. Okay? So he wasn't afraid to sink it in 2 car lengths deeper. He raced everybody as hard as they would race him, and we don't see a lot of that today. We really honestly don't. We see people that have cars that are set up. He understood his race cars, by the way. And Teddy understood a very valuable lesson, and it was invest in thyself. Whatever Teddy drove for somebody, everything, he wanted that car to have the best equipment, and if he had to buy it, he'd buy it because he was there to win. He wasn't there for second, third, or any of the above. Right, and his nephew is really coming into his own right now.
Yeah.
He honestly is. And Michael, I always feel bad for Michael because Michael had amazing accomplishments, and in some cases they were better than Teddy's at the same time period.
Yeah.
But it got overlooked because Michael went and started a family. He moved on, and now he's come back to it. So there's a lot of that too as well. And so forth with it. If we went back to the old era, I love Bugsy Stevens. I think he was so good. He was such a showman. The other drivers that always stood out. Gene Burgeon in the old days was another one of those guys, that was very good and and so forth with it. So, and we've got so many great ones today. We really do. That are the Wheel of Modified Tour has got a lot of names.
Yeah. Well, Ben, it was a pleasure to have you on the show. I think we could go another couple hours here. We'll probably have to have you back on the show in a couple of seasons or two here down.
Well, it was my pleasure, to be honest with you. I don't do a lot of stuff anymore like this, and a lot of the times I just don't do it. So it was a pleasure to come here. And I do want to say this in my closing thought, and it's not, it's not because I need the job or any of that, but and so forth with it. I am honored and proud to be a part of the Root family and Team Stafford, and I mean that.
We're glad to have you.
The fact that I've been able to hold on for 46 years, going into 47, is an amazing story all by itself. And so forth with it. So my goal, I shouldn't tell you this. This sounds so conceited, but my goal is here in my lifetime. We have grandstands named after everybody. We have all this stuff. My goal is if I had the ultimate gift, it would be to have the tower where I've broadcast all those
We'll
years.
see what I can do.
Right? And, that would be the ultimate. But don't do it too soon, because that means I'm going to be kicking off quick.
I mean, if we name it that he's out and Kyle's in, so there you go.
Don't put me in that position.
I know somebody that won't like that.
Well,
Thinking of the same guy.
It's been a pleasure, and
thank you
we're
so
glad
much.
to have you as always.
So much, and I have such respect for for Kyle and the young announcers, Joe Koss, all of those people. I've had the pleasure of working with them. They are my friends, and sometimes I'm harder on them, and they'll tell you that. Kyle will tell you. I don't think I talked to him for 2 years because I was so mad at him because he didn't do what I knew he was so much better than what he was doing, and I tried to fix it, right? And he didn't understand, and then we looked back and we laughed at it, and he goes, I get it now. You were trying to help me, not
Young and dumb.
Yes.
Back then.
So thank you all, and like I said, it's been an absolute pleasure, guys.
We'll see you at the Sizzler.
We sure will.